Hello, welcome to my first vodcast. I had the best time doing research for Dr. Neely on this technology, and I learned so much. The first thing I learned about was the cost. We were supposed to look at how much would this type of technology cost us. Well, vodcasts would be negligible, the cost. What we'd need is you can simply take your iPhone and record in your voice memos if you're doing a podcast. And if you're doing a vodcast, you could just go into your pictures and do a video. But I am fortunate enough to have a Logitech in my office that we do meetings with some of our grantees, and that is the medium I'm using today. So, are there any other costs that we need to think about that would cause us to terminate this idea? Yes, there are some, and that would be that we would potentially need to get the audio clipping editing tool. And then we could probably get some help from DOE's communications and media folks. Next, we were supposed to talk about security issues. I really don't think there are any security issues with creating podcasts and podcasts. However, Communications Office said work with them along the way. The next issue is that we need to look at user friendliness. Is this going to torture people to try to access? And the answer is no. All a podcast or a vodcast takes are a couple of clicks. However, people only like to do one click. So if you have a YouTube, they'll click and go. If you only have a podcast or a vodcast available to them, they won't really know all of the information that's on it. So they might not be willing to do the 2 clicks, that 2-tiered technology. I know it sounds pretty lazy, but it's kind of how we are in our fast-paced society. Joe Follick, our communications director, said that he doesn't watch podcasts and vodcasts because he's so busy he can glance at an email and see what's in there. However, with a podcast or a vodcast, you just don't know. Cassie Alakis, I think I just said that right, is a wealth of knowledge in this area, and she said that she felt like podcasts were really about getting out personalities rather than content. And she felt we could do that just fine. I agree with her. For example, she suggested if we wanted to have our district updates follow up with asking districts to send us questions, we could create a podcast with the answers, and that would get them to come on, click on a 2-minute or a 1-minute answer, and they would see what our personalities are like in our office. Michelle Gaines, Nicole Wilder, some of their coordinators out in the field have never seen them, and this would help create even a better working relationship, potentially. So, another idea that they had in communications when we were brainstorming was they felt like we could create a series. If you don't create something that's evergreen, then people are not going to continue to tune in. They have to be able to, excuse me, my phone is ringing right now. Oh, and I didn't answer it right.
Welcome to Onyx. For help at any
That's the problem with making podcasts. You need to shut your phone off and be totally engaged. Anyway, back to the brainstorm. Cassie suggested that she also thought parents would be potentially interested and have time to click on 3-minute, a series of podcasts or vodcasts. Her idea was things like how to increase your child's physical activity, how to improve your child's nutrition. So those are things that we're contemplating right now. Now, on to our last few things that we need to think about, and that is training requirements. How much training would people need to be able to create podcasts or vodcasts? Well, I think there's so much online that we've been looking at that are step-by-step directions that you could do it individually, Or we could have a bureau meeting that showed everybody all at once. Not me doing it, obviously. And then the hardware software requirements, again, like I mentioned before, we may need that digital audio recorder and then something to slice the audio, like that audio clipper editing tool. And lastly, the intellectual property implications. Just check with communications and work with them along the way, and you'll stay out of trouble on that one. Lastly, and very important, the ability to save, archive, and reuse. If it is just a one-shot podcast, you will lose your audience. Make it a series, have episodes that you're making sure that you market out there to start to have a following. So I hope that you've enjoyed. I have one other guest that I would like to introduce you to, and that is our avatar. He or she, we don't know which one it is right now, is another element that you can use to capture people's attention. I hope you've enjoyed this vodcast and learned a little something, and I look forward to hearing about your presentations on technology.